Marcus Chen wiped the sweat from his forehead as he stepped out of his mining crawler. The red dust of Kepler 442b swirled around his boots, and the twin suns cast harsh shadows across the rocky landscape. He had been working the outer perimeter of the human colony for 6 months now, searching for rare Earth deposits that would help fund the expansion of New Terra. The communication array crackled with static as he checked in with base camp. "Control, this is Rover 7. Finishing survey of Sector 12. Nothing promising here either." "Copy that, Marcus. Head back when you're ready. Storm front moving in from the east," came the reply from Sarah, the colony's communications officer. Marcus glanced at the darkening horizon. The storms on this planet were notorious for their intensity. Capable of stripping paint from vehicles and turning the air into a wall of flying debris. He began securing his equipment when a sound caught his attention. It was soft, almost musical but clearly distressed, like a child crying, but with harmonics that no human throat could produce. Following the sound, Marcus climbed over a ridge of crystalline rock formations. In a small crater below, partially hidden by fallen boulders, he spotted movement. His heart nearly stopped when he realized what he was looking at. The creature was small, no bigger than a 7-year-old human child, but clearly alien. Her skin shimmered with an iridescent quality, shifting between deep purple and silver depending on the angle of the light. She had large, luminous eyes that seemed to contain swirling galaxies, and delicate features that spoke of intelligence and emotion. What struck Marcus most was how vulnerable she looked. She was injured. One of her legs was bent at an unnatural angle, and there were cuts across her arms that leaked a fluid that glowed faintly blue in the dim light. She had been trying to reach something just out of her grasp, a small device that must have been thrown from her hands when she fell. Marcus's training kicked in. First rule of planetary exploration: avoid contact with unknown alien species. Second rule: report any encounters immediately to Colonial Command. But looking at this hurt child, because that's exactly what she was, regardless of species, Marcus found those rules crumbling in the face of basic human compassion. He approached slowly, hands visible and empty. The alien child noticed him and tried to scramble away, but her injured leg made her cry out in pain. The sound tugged at something deep in Marcus's chest. "Hey, it's okay," he said softly, knowing she probably couldn't understand his words, but hoping his tone would convey his intentions. "I'm not going to hurt you." Marcus knelt down several feet away and slowly reached into his supply pack. He pulled out his emergency medical kit and a ration bar. The child watched him with those impossibly large eyes, fear and curiosity warring in her expression. He held up the medical scanner, a device that could analyze injuries across multiple species thanks to the Galactic medical database that had been discovered in the ruins of an ancient civilization. The scanner hummed as it analyzed the child's injuries. Broken fibula, multiple lacerations, signs of dehydration and exhaustion. Marcus then broke the ration bar in half, keeping one piece and offering the other to the child. She stared at it for a long moment before her stomach made a sound that transcended species barriers. Hunger was universal. Cautiously, she reached out and took the food. She sniffed it carefully, then took a small bite. Her eyes widened in surprise, and she quickly devoured the rest. Marcus smiled and offered her his own half, which she accepted with slightly less hesitation. The storm was getting closer. Marcus could hear the wind picking up, and the light was fading fast. He gestured toward his crawler, then at the approaching storm clouds. The child seemed to understand the danger and nodded. Marcus carefully lifted her, surprised by how light she was. Her body temperature was several degrees warmer than human normal, and he could feel a subtle vibration, like a cat's purr, but more complex. She clutched the small device she had been reaching for. It looked like some kind of communicator or beacon. As he carried her toward his vehicle, Marcus activated his own communicator. He should report this. He should call it in, but something stopped him. Maybe it was the way she had looked at him with such trust after her initial fear. Maybe it was the memory of his own daughter, who he hadn't seen in 2 years since joining the colonial mission. Instead, he helped the alien child into the crawler's passenger seat and began the journey back to his small outpost station. It was a temporary shelter he used during extended surveys, equipped with basic medical supplies and enough food for several days. The outpost was a modest, prefabricated structure designed for functionality rather than comfort. Marcus carried the child inside and set her down on the small medical cot. She looked around with wonder, her large eyes taking in everything from the simple furniture to the glowing displays of the environmental systems. Marcus activated the medical bay's AudioBook, a sophisticated AI system designed to treat injuries across multiple species. The machine's sensors analyzed the child's biology and began preparing treatment options. Subject appears to be from the Zilani species, the AI announced in its neutral voice. Bone density approximately 30% less than human normal. Circulatory system based on copper rather than iron. Injuries are consistent with a fall from significant height. Zilani. Marcus had heard that name before, whispered in the darker corners of Colonial Command. A species that had once been widespread across this sector of the galaxy, before mysteriously disappearing several centuries ago. If this child was truly Zilani, she might be one of the last of her kind. The AudioBook extended several mechanical arms, each equipped with different medical instruments. The child shrank back in fear until Marcus gently took her hand. "It's going to help you," he said softly. "I know it looks scary, but it will make the pain go away." Whether she understood his words or simply trusted his tone, the child allowed the medical system to work. A spray of molecular healers sealed her cuts, and a biofoam cast formed around her broken leg. Pain medication specifically calibrated for her species' biochemistry was administered through a gentle skin patch. As the treatment concluded, Marcus noticed the child trying to activate her small device. It flickered weakly before going dark. She looked up at him with an expression that clearly conveyed her distress. Marcus examined the device. It was clearly advanced technology, far beyond anything the human colonies possessed. The power cell was depleted, but the connectors looked similar enough to human standards that he might be able to rig a charging solution. Working with the tools in his electronics kit, Marcus carefully connected the alien device to his portable power generator. The device hummed to life, displaying symbols and patterns that meant nothing to him, but caused the child to sigh with obvious relief. She activated the device and began speaking into it in a language that sounded like wind chimes mixed with distant thunder. Marcus couldn't understand the words, but he could hear the emotion. She was calling for help, calling for someone to come find her. After she finished her message, she looked up at Marcus and spoke again, this time clearly addressing him. Her voice was melodic, almost song-like, but there was unmistakable gratitude in her tone. She reached out and gently touched his hand, and Marcus felt a warm sensation, like sunlight on his skin. "You're welcome," he said, understanding that thanks needed no translation. Marcus prepared some food for both of them. Simple rations that the medical scanner had confirmed were safe for her species. As they ate together in the small outpost, he found himself wondering about her story. How had she ended up alone and injured on this remote part of the planet? Where was her family? Where were her people? The storm arrived in full force, just as they finished eating. The outpost's walls vibrated under the assault of wind and debris, but the structure held firm. The child moved closer to Marcus, clearly frightened by the violent sounds outside. He found himself speaking softly to her, telling her stories of Earth, of his daughter, of the dreams that had brought humanity to the stars. She listened intently, as if understanding every word, and slowly her fear faded. Eventually, exhausted by her ordeal and the medical treatment, she fell asleep curled up on the cot, her breathing deep and peaceful. Marcus sat watching her sleep, wondering what he had gotten himself into. By helping her, he had violated dozens of colonial regulations. If Command found out, he could face court-martial and deportation back to Earth. But looking at this sleeping child, he knew he had made the right choice. Outside, the storm raged through the night, but inside the small outpost, two beings from different worlds had found an unexpected connection. Marcus dozed fitfully in his chair, waking periodically to check on his young charge. Each time he looked at her, he was struck by how peaceful she appeared, and how the trust she had placed in him felt like both a gift and a tremendous responsibility. As the first light of dawn began to filter through the storm, Marcus had no idea that the child's message had been received. He had no idea that her family was not only alive, but actively searching for her. And he certainly had no idea that her mother was not just any Zalani, but a warrior protector whose reputation for dealing with those who threatened her young was known across 3-star systems. The storm was beginning to weaken, but a much more dangerous tempest was heading straight for Marcus's little outpost, and it would arrive with the fury of a mother's love and the deadly precision of a trained killer. Dawn brought an eerie calm to the landscape. The storm had passed, leaving behind a world scoured clean and glittering with crystalline dust. Marcus woke to find the alien child already awake, sitting up on the cot and playing with her device. The blue glow of its display painted her features in soft light, and she seemed much more alert and healthy after a night's rest. "Good morning," Marcus said, stretching the kinks from his neck. Sleeping in a chair had not been kind to his 43-year-old body. The child looked up and made a musical sound that he interpreted as a greeting. She held up the device and showed him the display. Marcus couldn't read the alien symbols, but the interface had changed. Where before there had been a simple communication array, now there was what looked like a tracking system with a slowly moving indicator. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cool morning air. Someone was coming. Someone was tracking the signal from the child's device. The child seemed excited, chattering in her melodic language and pointing at the display. To her, this was rescue. To Marcus, this was potentially his death warrant. He had no idea what the child had told her family about him. For all he knew, she had described being kidnapped by a strange alien monster. Marcus quickly gathered his essential gear and checked the outpost's defense systems. The shelter had basic shielding and a small defensive turret, designed to ward off the planet's more aggressive wildlife. Against an advanced alien species with unknown technology, it would be practically useless. He looked at the child, who was watching him with those large, intelligent eyes. She seemed to sense his distress and spoke to him in a questioning tone. Marcus knelt down beside her and pointed to himself, then to the approaching signal on her device. "They might not understand," he said slowly. "They might think I hurt you." The child studied his face for a long moment, then did something that surprised him. She stood up carefully, testing her weight on her healing leg, and moved to stand between Marcus and the door. She spoke firmly into her device, her tone completely different from the excited chatter of moments before. Now she sounded authoritative, even commanding. Whatever she was saying, Marcus hoped it was good. The tracking signal on the device was moving faster now, and Marcus's long-range sensors picked up movement in the sky. 3 objects approaching at high speed from the northwest. They were still too far away to get detailed readings, but their flight pattern spoke of advanced technology and military precision. Marcus activated his emergency beacon, sending a coded message to Colonial Command. If things went badly, at least there would be a record of what had happened. He kept the message vague. Alien contact, possible hostile situation, coordinates attached. The child was becoming more agitated as the signals drew closer. She kept speaking into her device, her tone growing more urgent. Marcus wondered if she was trying to explain what had happened, trying to tell her family that he was a friend, not a threat. The first ship came into view 15 minutes later, and Marcus felt his breath catch in his throat. It was beautiful in the way that apex predators were beautiful, sleek, deadly, and perfectly designed for its purpose. The hull seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal, and energy patterns danced along its surface in hypnotic waves. It was clearly a warship, built for speed and destruction. 2 more ships followed, taking up positions that would give them clear firing solutions on the outpost from multiple angles. Marcus had seen enough military maneuvers to recognize a textbook assault formation. The lead ship settled to the ground 50 meters from the outpost with barely a whisper of sound. Whatever technology powered it was far beyond human understanding. A section of the hull simply flowed open like water, and a figure emerged. Marcus got his first look at an adult Zelani, and immediately understood why they had been feared across the galaxy. She was tall, nearly 7 feet, with the same iridescent skin as the child, but more pronounced. Her body was lean and powerful, built for speed and combat. She wore armor that seemed to be grown rather than manufactured, flowing seamlessly with her natural contours. But it was her eyes that truly intimidated. They burned with an inner fire that spoke of intelligence, determination, and barely controlled fury. She moved across the ground with fluid grace, each step precise and purposeful. In her hands, she carried a weapon that hummed with contained energy, and Marcus could see more armaments integrated into her armor. This was no concerned parent looking for a lost child. This was a warrior coming to recover stolen property and exact vengeance on the thief. The child beside Marcus began calling out, her voice carrying clearly across the distance. The warrior's head snapped toward the sound, and for just a moment, the controlled fury in her expression cracked, revealing desperate relief underneath. But then her gaze fixed on Marcus through the outpost's transparent aluminum window, and the fury returned, doubled. She spoke, her voice carrying clearly despite the closed door. And Marcus didn't need a translator to understand the threat in her tone. The child grabbed Marcus's arm and shook her head vigorously, speaking rapidly in their shared language. She was clearly arguing with her mother, her young voice growing more and more insistent. Marcus made a decision that would either save his life or end it quickly. He slowly opened the outpost's door and stepped outside, his hands clearly visible and empty. The warrior's weapon was trained on him instantly, and he could feel the heat of its targeting system painting him with invisible light. At this distance, she could cut him in half before he could blink. "I helped her," Marcus said clearly, knowing she probably couldn't understand his words, but hoping his tone would convey his meaning. "She was hurt. I helped her." The child limped to the doorway and began speaking rapidly to her mother. Marcus heard his name. She had learned it somehow, probably from listening to him talk to himself as he worked. She pointed at her healed leg, at the medical equipment visible inside the outpost, at the remains of the food they had shared. The warrior listened, but her weapon never wavered from Marcus. When the child finished speaking, the warrior replied in a tone that brooked no argument. The child's response was equally firm, and Marcus found himself in the middle of what was clearly a family argument conducted at weapons range. The standoff stretched for long minutes. Marcus remained perfectly still, knowing that any sudden movement could trigger a response that would end his life. The child continued her animated discussion with her mother, occasionally gesturing toward Marcus in ways that he hoped were positive. Finally, the warrior spoke a single word that seemed to carry the weight of command. The child nodded and stepped back. The warrior approached Marcus slowly, her weapon still ready but no longer directly targeting him. She stopped just outside arm's reach and studied him with those burning eyes. Marcus could feel her evaluating him, measuring him against some internal criteria that might determine whether he lived or died. She spoke, her voice carrying musical undertones similar to her daughter's, but with harmonics that spoke of power and authority. "I don't understand," Marcus said softly. "But I meant no harm. She was hurt, and I helped her. That's all." The warrior tilted her head slightly, and Marcus realized she was studying not just him, but his manner, his posture, the way he held himself. She was reading his body language the way a human might read a book. After what felt like an eternity, she slowly lowered her weapon. She spoke again, her tone still wary, but no longer immediately threatening. The child clapped her hands together and limped over to stand between them. She took one of Marcus's hands and one of her mother's, bringing them together in a gesture that needed no translation. The warrior looked down at their joined hands, then back up at Marcus's face. When she spoke again, her voice carried a different quality, still powerful, still dangerous, but with an undertone of something that might have been respect. Marcus felt some of the tension leave his shoulders, but he knew he wasn't out of danger yet. He had helped the child, yes, but he was still an unknown alien who had been alone with her daughter for an entire night. In the warrior's position, he would be suspicious too. The child began speaking again, this time pulling both adults toward the outpost. She seemed determined to show her mother something specific. Inside the small shelter, she led them to the medical bay and began demonstrating how Marcus had treated her injuries. She pointed to the auto dock, to the medical supplies, to the cast that still protected her healing leg. Her explanations grew more animated as she described the storm and how Marcus had kept her safe through the long night. The warrior examined the medical equipment with professional interest, and Marcus realized she had some knowledge of healing herself. She spoke a few questions, and her daughter's responses seemed to satisfy whatever concerns she had. Then the child did something that changed everything. She picked up the empty ration packet from their shared meal and showed it to her mother. The warrior's eyes widened, and she looked sharply at Marcus. She spoke a single word, her tone incredulous. The child nodded enthusiastically and launched into another explanation. Marcus didn't understand what was happening, but he could see that something significant had shifted in the warrior's attitude. The suspicion was still there, but it was mixed now with what looked like amazement. The child finished her story and looked expectantly between her mother and Marcus. The warrior stared at Marcus for a long moment, then slowly reached up and began removing her helmet. Marcus got his first clear look at an adult Zalani face and was struck by how beautiful and alien it was. Her features were sharp and elegant, with the same large eyes as her daughter but surrounded by intricate patterns that seemed to shift and flow across her skin. When she spoke now, her voice carried emotional undertones that Marcus could feel as much as hear. She was asking him something, her tone urgent and hopeful. The child translated by pointing at the empty ration packet, then at Marcus, then making eating gestures. Marcus suddenly understood. She wanted to know if he had more food. But why was this so important? He nodded and went to his supply cabinet, pulling out several more ration packets. The warrior's reaction was immediate and intense. She spoke rapidly to her daughter, who responded with equal excitement. The child grabbed Marcus's hand and led him outside to the warrior's ship. As they approached, Marcus could see inside the open hull, and his heart clenched at what he saw there. More Zalani. Dozens of them, most appearing to be children or elderly individuals. They were clearly refugees, and from their condition, they had been running for a long time. Many showed signs of malnutrition and exhaustion. The warrior was speaking to him again, and this time he could hear the desperation underlying her words. These people were starving, and somehow his simple act of sharing food with one lost child had revealed him as a potential source of salvation. Marcus looked at his meager supplies, then at the dozens of hungry faces watching him from the ship. He had enough food for perhaps one more day, But looking at these desperate refugees, he knew what he had to do. He activated his communicator and called Colonial Command. Colonial Command, this is Marcus Chen at Outpost 7. I need to speak with Administrator Walsh immediately. Priority Alpha. The silence that followed stretched long enough for Marcus to wonder if his transmission had been blocked. Finally, Sarah's voice crackled through, tense with confusion. Marcus, what's your status? We received your emergency beacon hours ago, but you went dark. Are you under attack? Not under attack, but I need immediate authorization for emergency humanitarian aid distribution. I've encountered Zalani refugees, approximately 40 individuals, including children and elderly. They're in critical condition. Another long silence. Then a different voice, gruff and authoritative. Chen, this is Administrator Walsh. What the hell are you doing out there? You're supposed to report alien contact, not start a goddamn relief mission. Marcus looked at the warrior, who was watching him intently despite not understanding his words. Her daughter had moved to stand beside her, occasionally translating what she could of his body language. Behind them, the faces of desperate people watched from the safety of their ship. Sir, I found an injured Zalani child yesterday. I provided medical aid and shelter during the storm. Her family came to retrieve her, and they're refugees fleeing some kind of catastrophe. They're starving, Administrator. Some of these children won't last another day without food. Damn it, Chen, you know the protocols. We don't have clearance to interact with alien species, let alone provide material aid. You could be starting an interstellar incident. Marcus took a deep breath. Then let me start one, sir. Because if we turn our backs on dying children, what does that make us as a species? The warrior had been listening to his tone, and something in it made her step closer. She spoke softly to her daughter, who nodded and began speaking into her translation device. After a moment, the device emitted sounds that were clearly Marcus's language, though heavily accented and stilted. Human Marcus Chen, the mechanical voice said, I am Cathara, guardian prime of the Zalani. Your kindness to my daughter Zara has shown honor. We ask nothing but safe passage. We flee the devourers who consume worlds. Marcus activated his communicator's external speaker so Command could hear the translation. The child continued speaking. Her words carefully chosen. Our home world dies. The devourers strip planets of all life, leave only dead rock. We carry the last genetic records of our people, must find new home before we perish. Administrator Walsh's voice carried a different tone when he responded. Are you telling me these Zalani are refugees from a planetary extinction event? Yes, sir, Marcus replied. And based on what I've seen of their technology, if they wanted to hurt us, we'd already be dead. They're asking for help, not making demands. The warrior, Cathara, was speaking again. Her daughter translated, tears flowing down her young face as she conveyed her mother's words. Guardian Prime says the devourers follow soon behind. Our ships carry seeds of worlds, knowledge of 1,000 years, art and music and stories of our people. But ships fail. Food runs out, children grow weak. We came to this world hoping to find safe place to plant new garden. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Administrator, if there's a species out there that destroys entire planets, don't we need to know about it? Don't we need allies who understand the threat? Another voice joined the conversation. Colonel Martinez, the military commander of the colony. Chen, how many ships did you say they have? 3 visible, sir, but they look like escort vessels, fast, lightly armed. These aren't warships, they're lifeboats. Cathara seemed to understand the importance of the conversation. She spoke to her daughter, who nodded and began operating her translation device more extensively. When she spoke again, the translation was clearer. Guardian Prime offers exchange. Our knowledge of the devourers, their patterns, their weaknesses, for safe haven to heal and resupply. We have star charts showing safe routes away from devourer paths. We have technologies for rapid food production, water purification, defensive systems. Marcus could almost hear the wheels turning in Command's collective mind. The colony was struggling with food production in the harsh alien environment. Their water reclamation systems were constantly breaking down. And if there really was a species out there that could destroy entire planets, they needed all the information they could get. Administrator Walsh's voice carried the weight of decision. Chen, escort them to Landing Zone Alpha. I'm authorizing emergency protocols. We'll provide what aid we can while we sort out the implications. Roger that, Administrator. And, sir, thank you. Marcus turned to Cathara and her daughter, spreading his hands in a gesture he hoped conveyed invitation. Your people are welcome to come to our colony. We'll share what we have. Zara translated rapidly, and Marcus watched as Cathara's composed warrior facade finally cracked. Relief flooded her features, followed quickly by something that might have been tears. She spoke, her voice thick with emotion. Guardian Prime says that in all the worlds they have visited, only humans offered help without conditions. She says she will remember this kindness for all the generations of her people. The journey to the colony took several hours. Marcus rode in his crawler while the Zalani ships followed at a respectful distance. During the trip, Zara chattered constantly, telling him about her people's journey, their lost home, and her mother's desperate search for sanctuary. Marcus learned that the Zalani had once been one of the galaxy's greatest civilizations, with hundreds of worlds under their protection. But the Devourers had come from the void between galaxies, consuming everything in their path. World after world fell until only scattered refugee fleets remained. When they reached the colony, Marcus was amazed at what he saw. Administrator Walsh had mobilized the entire settlement. Medical teams stood ready with equipment specially programmed for Zalani physiology. The cafeteria had prepared food using molecular assemblers to match Zalani nutritional requirements. Even the children of the colony had contributed, making welcome signs and small gifts. Cathara emerged from her ship and stood before the assembled humans. She had donned her full ceremonial armor, and she looked every inch the proud leader of a fallen civilization. But when she spoke, her words were humble. People of Earth, Zara translated, we come before you as beggars, carrying nothing but the ghosts of our dead worlds and the hope of our children. You owe us nothing, yet you offer everything. This kindness will be remembered in our songs until the stars grow cold. Administrator Walsh stepped forward, looking every bit as nervous as Marcus had felt when first facing an alien warrior. Guardian Prime Cathara, on behalf of the human colony of New Terra, I welcome you and your people. Our resources are limited, but what we have, we share freely. The formal ceremonies that followed were moving. But what touched Marcus most was watching the Zalani children interact with the human children. Language barriers dissolved in the face of universal childhood enthusiasm for new playmates. Within hours, games had been invented that required no words, just laughter and imagination. Dr. Elizabeth Santos, the colony's chief scientist, was nearly vibrating with excitement as she discussed Zalani technology with their engineers. Marcus, do you understand what they're offering us? Their agricultural systems could increase our food production by 300%. Their water purification technology is centuries ahead of ours, and their star charts... She trailed off, staring at the holographic display showing the galaxy with marked devourer incursion routes. If they're right about this threat, we need to warn Earth immediately. Marcus found himself standing with Cathara on the colony's observation deck as the twin suns set over the alien landscape. Through Zara's translation, they had been sharing stories of their respective worlds, their hopes for the future, their fears about the darkness spreading through the galaxy. Your daughter saved my people today, Cathara said through the translator. not just by leading me to you, but by trusting you with her life. That trust opened a door between our species." "She's an amazing child," Marcus replied. "Brave, intelligent, kind. You should be proud." "She has her father's heart," Kethera said, and Marcus could hear the sadness in the original words, even without translation. "He died defending our world so that we could escape." His last words were to trust in the kindness of strangers, for that might be our salvation. Marcus thought about his own daughter, safe on Earth but growing up without him, while he pursued dreams of building humanity's future among the stars. Children are our future, regardless of species. Everything we do for them. A month later, the partnership between humans and Zalani had transformed New Terra beyond recognition. The colony's population had doubled, but so had its capabilities. Zalani agricultural pods dotted the landscape, growing food that could sustain both species. The defensive systems they had helped install had already proved their worth when a pack of the planet's more aggressive predators attempted to attack the settlement. More importantly, joint human-Zalani teams were working around the clock to establish communication with Earth and the few other known human colonies. The news about the Devourers had sent shockwaves through human space, but it had also united humanity like never before. Marcus often found himself working alongside Kethera, their initial wariness having evolved into genuine friendship. She had taught him some of the Zalani language, and he had helped her understand human customs and culture. Their children had become inseparable, with Zara serving as an unofficial ambassador between the two species. One evening, as they watched their children playing together in the communal garden the two species had built, Kethera spoke without using the translator. "Marcus, friend," she said in careful English, "I have question." "What's that?" "When you first found Zara, why you help? Your people have rules about contact with aliens, yes? You risk much." Marcus thought about the question seriously. It was something he had asked himself many times over the past month. "Because she was a child who needed help," he said finally. "Because when you strip away all the differences in biology and culture and technology, some things are universal. Compassion, kindness, the need to protect the innocent. Those aren't human traits or Zalani traits. They're just right." Kethera nodded slowly. "This is why your species will survive the coming darkness," she said. "The Devourers understand only consumption, only taking. But humans understand giving. This is strength they cannot defeat." A year later, the first joint human-Zalani exploration fleet launched from New Terra, carrying refugees to new worlds and volunteers to help establish defenses against the Devourer threat. Marcus stood on the bridge of the lead ship, watching the stars wheel past while Zara excitedly pointed out constellations from her people's mythology. The galaxy was vast and dangerous, filled with threats that could destroy entire civilizations. But it was also filled with potential friends, with species that could teach and learn from each other, with children who could grow up knowing that kindness and courage could overcome any darkness. And it had all started with a simple human impulse to share food with a hungry child. Marcus smiled as he remembered that moment of decision in the crater, when he chose compassion over protocol. It had been the right choice then, and it would be the right choice again, no matter what challenges the stars might bring. In the end, that was what made humans special in this vast universe, not their technology or their weapons, but their willingness to help a stranger in need. It was a strength that no devourer could consume, and it would light the way forward for generations yet to come.